Is Thursday, June 11th. This is the Board of Directors regular meeting. Ms. Pania, can you please call roll?
Absolutely. Director Sheets?
Present.
Kelly is not with us this evening. Sailors?
Here.
Gould?
Present.
Orzali?
Here.
Wood?
Here.
Clark?
Here.
Jones?
Here.
And White.
Here.
All right. The Metro Cable announcement, the open session meeting is videotaped for Cablecast on Metro Cable 14. Replay on Saturday, June 13th at 2 p.m. and Monday, June 15th at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. Webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. This is the public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within the district's jurisdiction, including items on or not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers?
I didn't have anyone contact me beforehand, but Art, if you could unmute all of our attendees and give them a chance to speak if they wish.
I'm doing that now.
We didn't get your message either because you were not speaking or because of a bad connection. To disconnect, press 1. To record your message, press 2.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that was about, but I'm going to mute that person. Okay, attendees, you are all, or at least have the ability to unmute if you would like to speak. Now would be a good time.
We didn't get your message either because you were not speaking.
Okay, yeah, I'm not going to let them stay.
Press 1. To record your message, press 2.
Okay.
All right, hearing no speakers. Moving on to the consent items. Are there any questions for the board members?
Madam Chair, I'd move consent.
Second.
Great, we have a first and a second. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould?
Aye.
Orzali?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Sailors?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
White?
Aye.
And Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, moving on to the first action item, fiscal year 2020-21, preliminary budget. CFO Thomas.
Good evening, directors. While I share my screen to show the PowerPoint presentation, I will turn it over first to Chief Harms, who I think would like to say a few words.
Please.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening, directors. I know a couple weeks ago when we had preliminary budget before finance, a few of you were able to listen in. We really don't have any changes in between that one and this one. I think probably for us, myself and the deputies and Amanda, is really putting this budget together, and this is actually our 5th budget that we've worked through together. Really was just the unknown that's happening right now is what are the economic impacts that are going to be out there? What things can we do today, though, really, to set us up for success as we move forward? I had originally sat down and kind of wrote out some stuff about the stock market, but if you look at what happened today, again, it just shows how volatile things are. And for us, really, what are the things over the next 18 months? As I've said before, this budget that we're bringing to you tonight is a very strong operational budget. What does that mean? It's what we used as our guidelines when we built the budget, which what can we do with the funding that we have that provides the best service that is out there. Earlier this year, we came and we talked about our medic and our ambulance service delivery. Our goal was to add 5 additional ambulances to be able to put coverage into the system. In this budget, what you will see is that even though we are going to start the budget year with $2 million of surplus, we were able to add things in that directly relate to service delivery, but there were also things that if needed to, we could collapse in the future. So 2 examples of those are each year during kind of the peak time during the flu season, we would add 2 additional medics as flex medics. So they were 12 hours a day, every day. just because we see the call volume used to be that the weekends were busier than during the week, but nowadays it's just equal. It doesn't matter if it's a Tuesday or a Friday. So we added the two, and really in the past what we would do was pay for those flex medics just out of basically the overtime account. This year we added the 2 additional flex medic switch funding in there to cover the complete year. And you will also see that we have on the agenda tonight, or you just passed on the agenda tonight, our A contract, which adds 2 more additional medics. Both of those things that are very positive is that it allows us, if we move forward, whether it's at mid-year or final budget, but it allows us to decrease services in a way that doesn't impact the membership as far as people go. So again, we've built those things into there to be able to move forward. We continue to invest in training. There's some capital items that we had identified very early on to continue on with those capital items, but again, having the ability to decrease if needed. You'll see in the budget, we are not going to run an academy class in fiscal year 2021. In the back half of that budget, we do have money that's in there because of anticipated retirements, unknown medical retirements that always happen. Is that our goal would be in the next fiscal year probably to have a very large academy to be able to catch up during that time. 82% of the budget this year, again, will be with our number one resources, or our people. We anticipate possibility of a 2% raise that was built into the contract. But again, probably the hardest thing for us to be able to do and work around are the things that we have no control over. And we've all talked about that. And I know a few of you, we've talked over this last week or so about pension costs, the insurance costs, medical and general liability, the OPEB. Those costs continue to come in, and looking at what we're doing right now, this budget is based off of 2018. So really, if you look down the road 18 to 24 months, looking at what happens to those costs is possibly we'll have additional costs as we move forward. Again, we assumed our increases. I'm very happy that the team sat down along with Amanda. We were able to add some medics into there. We'll start there. Our goal is to finish the year with a 15% reserve at about $32 million. And at this time, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to CFO Amanda to present the preliminary budget to all of you.
Thank you, Chief Harms. Hopefully everyone can see the PowerPoint presentation on their screen. So just to start us off, as Chief Harms said, the preliminary budget was presented to the Finance and Audit Committee at the May 28th meeting. And since that time, no changes to the budget have been made. As we talked about at that meeting, and really, what is still the case today is that at this point in time, the financial impacts from COVID-19 remain largely uncertain. But we are not expecting significant impacts to revenues and expenses in fiscal year 2021. So really what that means for the 2021 budget is that uncertainty about what the future impacts might be, again, as Chief Harms spoke to, has really led us to a cautious approach to developing the preliminary budget for 2021, resulting in an overall $2 million budgeted general fund surplus. You've heard me say before, but I think it's never been more true than this year. The preliminary budget really is a starting point. It's called preliminary for a reason. So, we will obviously continue to refine the budget as we have more information throughout the year. So we will, we'll come back at final budget and mid-year budget with new information as we have more data. So kind of just before we get into actually talking about the 2021 budget, I did want to provide just a little bit more background information about what we know and what we don't know about the financial impacts of COVID-19. And I think at this point, there's a lot more that we don't know about what the future economic impacts might be than what we do. But kind of looking at what we're seeing and what we've already seen, there have been some immediate and ongoing impacts. So we have some information about these things. One of which is the reduction in EMS transport activity. So we certainly saw a reduction in March and April, and we're estimating that the total reduction in transports during those 2 months probably resulted in about $1.5 million in lost revenue. I will say that we've already received some CARES Act funding for about 400,000 of that lost revenue, and we've applied for more. The other thing that I will see is that, I think we've seen in May and June some recovery in those numbers that really indicate that this may have been more of a temporary impact. And then in addition, we've incurred some expenses in responding to the emergency. So we have an emergency operations team that was staffed up, obviously additional PPE expenses, and then the operation of the mobile integrated health or community care response units. So those also we do expect to receive funding to offset. So we'll be applying for public assistance funding from FEMA. We've also submitted an AFG grant application for PPE. So again, we sort of expect that to be, kind of a short-term impact and also substantially offset by federal funding. So the next category of potential impacts are kind of more in the medium to longer term. And here's where there really is just a lot of uncertainty, where things are really going to be determined by what happens in the economy over, as Chief Harms said, sort of the next 12 to 18 months, kind of looking at how things play out. But we do know that these are potentially higher impacts, and this is sort of what's led us to the cautious approach in 2021, preparing for potential negative impacts in future years. So these include things like property tax revenues, obviously dependent on what's going on in the economy, but also lagged in terms of the impact and response to that. Also, our pension and OPEB liabilities, which are impacted significantly by what happens in the market and what the investment return is. And then finally, possible shift in EMS payer mix. I know everyone's seen the headlines on unemployment numbers, and that obviously impacts health insurance coverage, which ultimately has an impact on our EMS cost recovery. However, we really don't know what the federal response to that is going to be and what that might mean in terms of some of the supplemental reimbursement programs that we participate in. So really just a lot of uncertainty on these items, where we're not expecting at this point significant impact to 2021, but we are keeping our eye on what the possible future impacts might be. So kind of looking at a couple of those topics, property taxes. Property tax revenues lag market events by about 12 to 18 months. So our fiscal year 2021 taxes over the budget year that we're going to be talking about tonight, those taxes are based on values as of January 1, 2020. So values predating any COVID-19 impact, which is why we're really not expecting to see any impact in the 2021 year. However, what happens through the end of this calendar year will impact our fiscal year 21-22 tax revenues, because those will be values as of January 1, 2021. And, we do know that, for March, April, May, there was an impact to sales activity, and there's really a potential for moderate to severe impact in the future if that sales activity doesn't rebound later this year. So that's information that we don't have yet, but we'll certainly be taking a look at that data as we think about what the future year impacts might be. And then, looking beyond fiscal year 21-22, obviously there's just a lot of uncertainty about what might happen with the economy and what that might mean for property tax revenues. And we just don't have the data to produce estimates at this point. So because we simply don't know what will happen. So in thinking about that, I mean, I think what we do know is what has happened historically. And what this chart is showing is district property tax revenues before and after the last recession. And I think this is informative for a couple of reasons, because it does demonstrate that lag that I talked about. So if you look on this chart, that recession officially began in December 2007. And you can see that we didn't really have a significant property tax revenue impact as a result of that until a couple of fiscal years later. So that's kind of showing that 12 to 18 month lag that I mentioned. What you can also see is that, you know, what resulted from that recession, and again, this is not predictive, so this is not what's going to happen this time, but it does kind of give us some historical context of what has happened, is that there were several years of declining property tax revenues. So we saw, you know, a 9% drop followed by 4%, another 4%, another 3%. Really overall, it was about a 19% reduction in property tax revenues, and it was 8 years before property tax revenues returned to their pre-recession peak. So if you look at, you know, kind of a comparison of revenues in each of those years to that pre-recession peak, it was a total of about $100 million in lost revenue over that period of time. So, you know, because property tax revenues are such a significant funding source for the district, obviously these types of negative impacts have a large overall cumulative impact. So it's clearly something that, you know, we're going to be keeping our eye on, and you know, are going to be looking at data as it comes out and developing estimates as we have the information. But I just want to underline that we really don't have it right now. Right now, we just know that there's, you know, that there are potential negative impacts, and we know that there's some uncertainty that it makes sense to be prepared for. Kind of looking at, you know, what some of the other potential impacts could be, and thinking about our pension and OPEB liabilities. So I mentioned you know, investment return. And so negative impacts on investment return could result in higher required contributions for both pension and OPEB liabilities. But again, similar to property taxes, those impacts would be lagged. So if we look at our required contributions for this upcoming budget year, for fiscal year 2021, the CalPERS contributions are based on an actuarial valuation as of June 30th, 2018, right? So we have about a 2-year lag in terms of when that investment return and other experience impacts our required contributions. Similarly, on the OPEB side, so this upcoming budget year 2021, that contribution is based on a valuation that's done every other year, this one as of June 30, 2019. So we have another lag there. If we think about what's happening right now, and, you know, Chief Harms kind of sort of stole my line, I think, when I was talking about this with Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago. It was, well, you know, things now look better than they did a few months ago, and then today was another volatile day, and who knows what's going to happen by the end of the fiscal year. But whatever does happen, that current year investment return will impact pension and OPEB contributions beginning July 1, 2022, so the fiscal year 22-23 budget. So, you know, so whatever does end up happening this year, we'll be able to sort of estimate and plan for that impact in future years. And, you know, we can sort of think about what that might look like based on this chart, which just gives some possible scenarios. Not that, you know, there's any likelihood attached to any of these, but it's just a way of thinking about, okay, what might it mean? So what this is showing is projected CalPERS contributions under different investment return assumptions for this current fiscal year. So CalPERS assumed rate of return is 7%. So they assume that they're going to earn 7% on their money every year. And that's what that bottom red line is showing in terms of what projected future contributions would be if that assumed return was met. And then each of the lines above that is kind of showing, you know, more and more pessimistic investment return scenarios. So 0% would be the green line, -5% is purple, -15% is blue, -25% is orange. And I realize that -25% seems extremely conservative. I just will point out, again, in terms of historical context, you know, during the last recession in fiscal year the CalPERS return was negative 24%. So not unprecedented. However, you know, those are single year returns. The 7% is an assumption over the long term. And the idea is that these things do average out over time, but when big shocks like that happen, they can impact contributions for several years to come. So basically, if you kind of average out, you know, these different scenarios and what the impact is for every 1% reduction, so 1% less than that assumed 7% return, that would translate into an additional $1 million contribution required each year. So you can kind of, you know, think about what the impact would be based on sort of that rule of thumb. And like I said, you know, we'll have more information when we know what actually happens this year and the following year, and a couple of years time to sort of factor that into the forecasts going forward. So now just kind of with that sort of backdrop about, you know, what are we looking at and what do we know and what do we don't know about the current economic environment and what the impacts might be. Turning to the fiscal year 2021 budget. You know, as we mentioned, the budget is taking this cautious approach. There's an overall $2 million surplus budgeted in the general fund. That's resulting in a projected ending reserve balance of $32 million. So that would be at the end of fiscal year 2021. And you know, this is that building of the reserve balance is another indication of kind of the approach and addressing sort of the uncertainty that's out there. So in the budget, we're showing increases in property tax revenues, medic cost recovery, and deployment revenues. And as I mentioned, we're not projecting at this point in time any negative impacts from COVID-19 to the fiscal year 2021 revenues. Our labor cost increases in 2021, as Chief Harms mentioned, are driven largely by pension, OPEB, and medical contributions. And then we're also reflecting some cost savings as a result of deferring the next firefighter academy beyond fiscal year 2021, and also eliminating certain non-essential services and supplies expenditures. So looking at the overall budget for all district funds, that's what we're showing here on this slide, and then focusing on the general fund, which is the first column there, you can see that for fiscal year 2021, we're showing revenues and expenditures in the general fund roughly equal to each other of about $229 million. And next we look at the transfers that need to go out of the general fund. So there's about $7 million that's going from the general fund to the capital facilities fund. And that is essentially paying for debt service in the capital facilities fund, as well as any capital assets that aren't being financed in 2021. And then we have money that's coming in from the IGT fund to the general fund. So that's net funding of about $9 million that's coming into the general fund. And when you look at the overall bottom lines, our revenues minus expenditures, minus transfers out plus transfers in, that's where we have our $2 million operating surplus in the general fund. Before I leave this slide, because I'm going to focus the rest of my presentation on the general fund, I did want to point out in those yellow circles there are the capital outlay that we're budgeting. So in the capital facilities fund, there's about $6 million for equipment, vehicles, apparatus, other capital purchases. And then in the development impact fees fund, we are budgeting $7 million for the construction of Station 68. So that would be using development impact fee revenue to pay for that construction. So looking a little bit closer at the general fund and some of the year-to-year changes. So from our current 1920 mid-year budget to this proposed preliminary budget for 2021, Property taxes, we're looking at an increase of about $7 million year over year, and that's about 4.5%. This is an assumed amount that's based on estimates that are developed by our property tax consultant. So when we come back at final budget, we hope to have an amount that's actually based on the tax roll finalized by the county assessor. So right now we're working with assumptions about those revenues. Overall, total revenues, we have about a $14 million increase to that $229 million total revenue number. Looking at expenses, increasing about $10.5 million year over year. And then our transfers in and out, essentially unchanged from 1920 to 2021. But if you look at the bottom line, so that $2 million budgeted surplus in 2021 compares to a $1 million budgeted deficit in this current year. So overall, a $3 million improvement year to year. Looking back at the history of general fund revenues, you know, that the dark blue portion is really the same thing that we were looking at when, a few slides ago when we looked at the history of property tax revenues. Light blue is all other revenues. So really over that period of time, we did see larger increases in other revenues, mostly medic cost recovery revenues, so that pre-recession total revenues recovered faster than, or we post-recession recovered to the pre-recession level faster than property tax revenues did. Looking at fiscal year 2021, total revenues, including the transfer in of $238 million, that's that $14 million increase year over year. Half of that roughly being property tax revenues, half of that increase being property tax revenues. And then the other increases that we're seeing are about $2 million for medic cost recovery. And then we have a $5 million increase in deployment revenues, really because 1920 was an unusually low year for deployments. So when we go back to budgeting at an average level for 2021, we have a significant increase year over year. In terms of the split of our revenues, about 70% are property taxes or property tax related. The next largest category is charges for services, which includes the medic cost recovery at about 24%. Our operating transfers in, that's the IGT revenue, 4%, and then about 1% in other revenues. Looking at our expenditures now in the general fund, so the 2021 budget has budgeted labor expenditures of $194 million. That's about 82% of total budgeted expenditures. Our services and supplies, about 13%. And then licenses, debt service, assessments, that's $4 million or 1.8%. And then the transfer that's going out to the capital facilities fund is the remaining 3% of general fund expenditures. Looking at that $194 million in budgeted labor expenditures, that's a $10 million increase compared to the current year budget. So some of the changes from this year, as we've already talked about, increases in our required pension, OPEB, and medical contributions represent the largest share of increase. We also have an increase in deployment overtime for the same reason that we did on the revenue side, which is that, you know, this year is an unusually low year. And then we do have an assumed 2% wage increase effective January 1, 2021. I do want to emphasize that this is assumed because it is tied to the assumed property tax revenue increase. So that final number won't be known until we get into the fiscal year. And hopefully by final budget, we will know both what the property tax value increase will be, as well as what that would result in based on the terms of the MOU. So at this point, those are both assumptions. And then finally, we have some savings, as I mentioned, as a result of the Firefighter Academy being deferred and beyond 2021. So obviously, because we had those types of expenses in 1920, eliminating them from 2021 results in a change in the budget. So turning to look at our services and supplies budget, that totals $31 million, and that's about $1 million increase compared to the current year. 0.3 million of that is for the additional contract ambulance units. We also have about $500,000 increase for liability and property insurance premium. And then offsetting those increases, we have a decrease of about $1 million for safety equipment, clothing, and supplies. That's due to a combination of 1920 having large one-time expenditures for the SCBA purchase that we no longer have in 2021. And then also deferring that academy meant that we don't have those types of expenses in the 2021 budget. And then finally, there's about $300,000 decrease due to reductions that were made in travel, conference, and training budget. So just kind of wrapping up and looking at the other items in a summary of the general fund. So the final category of expenditures are debt service, assessments, and contributions. That budget totals $4 million. It largely includes the assessment that we pay to the county for property tax collection, and then the assessment that's paid to the state for the GEMT quality assurance fee program. As we've already talked about, the net transfers coming into the general fund are a net positive of $2 million. So there's $7 million going out to the capital facilities fund and $9 million coming in from the IGT fund. So overall total revenues minus expenditures plus transfers is that $2 million budget surplus, resulting in a projected general fund reserve at the end of the fiscal year of $32 million. And that concludes my presentation. So our recommendation is to adopt the preliminary budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Are there any questions from the board members?
Yes, Madam President, this is Gay. Thank you, Amanda, to you, your staff, all the finance and grant staff for pursuing that funding from the CARES Act and FEMA and the other potential sources there. That's greatly appreciated. I would like to request that a copy of this PowerPoint please be sent to us as directors so we have it for reference. It's an excellent summary of where we are. I have one question here. The IGT 9.2 million that was mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is that secured? Is that a for short thing, or is that a projected number?
Yes, so that's a good question. What we transitioned to a few years ago was programming IGT revenue for use in the general fund the year after the IGT actually occurred. So that is funding that's resulting from prior year IGTs. In fact, that revenue was all received, I think, as of last month. So it's through the activity year of fiscal year 18-19. And we actually do the IGT in fiscal year 19-20, and then it will fund general fund expenditures in fiscal 2021. So it is in hand, and then we have budgeted in the IGT fund the IGT activity that would occur in fiscal year 2021 that would be available for use in the general fund in future years.
Mm-hmm. And then just a comment that the deferral, thank you for that. The deferral of the academy could have an impact on our overtime costs in the next year because of the time, well, obviously less people and the time lag after recruitment academy and getting them online. So just a little aside there, because that could spike one of our numbers. And let's see, one other comment, yeah, the idea of using our surplus and programming it into collapsible operations or programs is a really good policy, and I agree with. So thank you all very much for the presentation.
All right, any other questions or comments for the board members? All right, we will need to take a resolution separately for each of these. So I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll move resolution A, or number A, resolution 2021 preliminary budget for the general operating fund 212A.
I second it.
Great. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'll move resolution B, 2021 preliminary budget for the Capital Facilities Fund 212D.
Second
Aye.
it.
Great. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'll move item C, resolution 2021 preliminary budget for the Grants Fund 212G.
And I will second that.
Great. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Keep going. I'll move number D, resolution 2021 preliminary budget for the Development Impact Fee Fund 212I.
Second it.
Great. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali. Director Rosali, can we get your vote one more time?
Aye.
Thank you. Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I'll move item E, resolution 2021 preliminary budget for the Leased Properties Fund 212L.
Great. I'll second it.
Great. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'll move item F, resolution 2021 preliminary budget for the IGT Fund 212M.
I'll second it.
Great. We have a first and a second. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to action item number 2, disclosure of material expenditure, commercial insurance, Special District Risk Management Authority, Mr. Brad Spinks.
Can I interrupt you?
Madam
just a
Chair, yeah, before you go, do we need to move on the recommendation for the budget resolutions?
Oh, I apologize. I X'd it out already. I got ahead of myself. Yes, we do.
The pay schedule, I mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll move the staff recommendation to adopt the pay schedule for employees as presented.
I'll second it.
Perfect. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, now moving on to action item number 2, disclosure of material expenditure, commercial insurance, Special District Risk Management Authority, Brad Spenningson.
Wow, really good.
I practiced, that's why I missed the last one.
Well, thanks for having me. Brad Svenningson, USI Insurance. I handle your commercial insurance, including your aviation and whatnot. The first item is the package policy, which is currently with SDRMA. It covers your general liability, your errors and omissions, your employment practices liability insurance, your auto liability, your auto physical damage coverage, and your property. The buildings and contents are insured for $138 million. Your district vehicles are insured for $54 million. And it provides $10 million of general liability insurance, including employment practices liability, and also $10 million of auto liability. Your premium last year was $1.2 million. Your premium this year is the bulk of your overall increase is $1.674 million, just under 40%. The increase is primarily due to two factors. SAC Metro claims, especially your 17 to 18 year and your 18 to 19 policy years where the claim reserves are over $2.5 million. Having said that, you had a really good year this year, knock on wood. And I had a couple of extra markets that were interested in quoting this year, and they just want to have another good year for the upcoming year. So hopefully that will happen. The other reason is California continues to see increases in property, auto liability, and excess liability premiums. It's just not a lot of surplus out there, people that want to spend money on California insurance right now. So we did go to an awful lot of markets. There was, like I said, two other markets, including Arch and Munich Re, that are now players in the California market, which one of them actually was willing to quote. They just couldn't get under 2 million. So that was that. Everyone else either declined because of losses, or there's a couple of carriers that were concerned about the employment practices liability claims activity. And so that kind of sums up on the package policy. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Are there any questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I'll move staff's recommendation that we authorize the expenditure.
Second.
Great, we have a first and a second. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, action item number 3, disclosure of material expenditure excess workers' compensation insurance, Safety National Casualty Corporation. Mr. Svenningson, you're up.
Yes, thank you. Yes, this is the policy that gives you the excess insurance over your $3 million primary. So if there's something horrible that happens, this will take place and take care of the coverage. You've had decreases the last 4 years. This year, the rate is up 3.5%. The rate is still lower than what you paid in 16 to 17, 17 to 18, and 18 to 19 policy years. One significant change, unfortunately, is all carriers are removing the communicable disease endorsement. Currently, you have coverage for COVID-19. That ends on 7/1. So anyone that has it up to 7/1, the coverage is there. But after 7/1, at this point, it may change down the road, but I think all insurance companies are just taking a pause to see how this thing plays out. And we just don't know. So no one is taking on that risk. All other markets, Chubb, State National, and Arch either declined because of the nature of your exposure or they just couldn't compete with Safety National. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions from the board? I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move we adopt staff's recommendation and authorize the expenditure.
I'll second.
Great, we have a first and a second. Can you please call the roll?
Director Gould,
Aye.
Rosali,
Aye.
Wood,
Aye.
Sailors,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
and Sheets.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, moving on to reports. President's report. Report out that the executive committee met tonight. We addressed action item number 1, board committee and delegate appointments. It was decided and recommended to appoint Director White to serve on the policy committee, and also on item G, Sacramento County 2x2 community, committee as an alternate on the Sacramento 2x2. Moving on to the fire chief's report. Chief Harms?
Madam
Oh.
President?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Gay, and just a quick follow-up from the executive committee. Thank you very much for filling out all the assignments. And just to reaffirm, for example, I'm on 3 different committees, so that if I cannot attend, my understanding is I will contact the clerk of the board, Melissa Padilla, and let her know about my upcoming absence, and then she can contact the appropriate alternate. Is that our basic process?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, moving on to the fire chief's report. Chief Harms.
Good evening again, directors. It's been 2 weeks since our last meeting. We went ahead and maintained our response to COVID-19, but we really had to adjust our response when we saw just across the, not so much the district, but with the city, the amount of marches and protests and activity across the region. I just want to really compliment the operations group for being able to sit down and do the planning portions of it necessary to be ready to go. Each of the shift commanders doing conference calls with their VCs, making sure everybody is on the same page, really communicating. And then the positive relationship that we have with the city, of the city being able to share their plans with us, inviting us to be involved, inviting one of our members to be in the real-time crime center, so that the information that the folks and the troops had in the field was the best, the quickest, and the most accurate information that we could have during that time. Tonight, I'm sure there's a few people that are nervous, is that tomorrow is the captain's written tested is here at headquarters. We have 28 candidates that will start, and so good luck to each one of those candidates. Next week is the Captain's Academy. The Battalion Chiefs and Training Division and Chief Kiley put together a program for 5 days, which prepares them for the job as a captain. Once they complete that, they'll move on to the next section, which is the interview process. Talked about relationships. One of the things we came to you probably about 1.5 years or so ago, or maybe even 2 years ago now, is we put a captain down in the UI area, and that was a funded position. Due to that relationship and continuing on, Chief Runicki now is on the advisory committee or the purchasing committee, which gives us a voice on that committee. But he was also able to work with the group, and they had a large purchase of PPE. So we were the recipients of a large amount of PPE as we move forward. I think the thing we see is just the unknown, the continued use of masks and gowns and glasses, but making sure we have enough here. And again, the relationship really paid off on that side of it. Our mobile integrated health unit is still out in the field, both of them. They'll end on June 30th. I'll just say that we are still struggling with the hospital council for getting our contract done. We seem to make a step forward, and then we take about 2 steps back, and we continue with that. We definitely have seen the importance of it, the impact that it can have, but we still struggle to be able to push it across the line to get a contract done and be able to move forward then. The Consumnes vehicle was up and running, and today was its last day, and it is now out of service. We tested for antibody testing. I think a number of you have been either involved or kind of communicated with the group. As of Tuesday, we did 533 tests. We have a total of 625, and so we're continuing on. We've had 9 positive results, which indicates about a 1.69% positive. I think the important thing with that goes back to what I just said about our PPE. We fall into that high-risk group of exposure, and what it shows is that I believe what it shows is that the use of the PPE, our members are using the PPE out there, and when exposed, it's doing really what we would expect it to do. I also think, and we hope to continue on with the basic cleaning of fire stations twice a day, cleaning of equipment, continuing those hygiene things that we know have made a difference as we move forward. I just talked with Lisa Barsdale, our fire marshal, and just wanted to get just a little bit of a snapshot when we talk about the budget, we talk about construction, kind of from their side, from CRRD, is if we looked at January through May of 2019 and took the statistics from there and then applied it to 2020 on a few different areas, where are we at? If you look at code enforcement on inspections, during that January through May period of 2019, we did 959. In 2020, we did 661. That would be expected. That's about 300 less inspections. As soon as we had shut things down, we quit going out and doing apartments, and unless it was either an emergency or that it was a violation that was brought to us. So Lisa feels really strongly that once we get things open back up, we'll catch up with those. But if you look at plan review, in 2019, we did 1,271. In 2020, we've done 1,298. So those are up for about 20 on the plan reviews, and it has remained steady. I think it is July 1st or July 6th, the county will reopen their desk downtown, and so we'll be back involved. So plan review has remained steady. If you look at construction inspections, in 19, we did 2,267. This year we did 2,531. So construction inspections still remain up. Overall residential looks like it's down about 5%, but overall with construction, it's up by about 270, looking at the same period as last year. So those are good numbers for us. One last thing, or two last things, weed abatement, they put out 303 letters were sent out on May 1st. Our first round of looking at compliance out there, 61% compliant rate, which again, during this time is very good. And in 2 weeks, we'll go with the next inspections. The last one from that area, and a lot of questions have come out about fireworks, the displays, and also Safe and Sane. They are moving forward with Safe and Sane sales. It does look like the number of applications for permit for the booths are down. The other one is on as far as large displays. There are a number of them that have already decided not to have any type of display. We are working with 2 different communities to see if they are going to try to do it, but it's kind of really unknown right now. But most of the displays that would have happened on the 4th are being pushed out to Labor Day weekend. And for some promotions, Administrative Specialist Yori Torres, she was an office tech with us, has moved up to Administrative Specialist, and so she'll be at EMS. We've had a couple of retirements. Julie Cole, 17 years of service with the district. She was over as an HR specialist. She retired on May 26th. May 29th, Engineer Rebecca Cordova, 15 years of service. On June 1st, Captain Novotny, 29 years of service, retired. And on June 3rd, Engineer Mark Schreck with 28 years of service, retired. So congratulations to the retirees. I hope they enjoyed their retirement. And I'm sure Director Jones will talk more about it, but we had a 2x2 meeting with the County of Sacramento. I just think on my side, it continues to be just a very productive meeting with the supervisors. We talked somewhat about our mobile integrated health, some interest that we have in a crash truck that will become available, and some contracts, hazmat contracts. So I'll leave the rest of that to Director Jones. And the last thing is on July 1st, I was asked by the California Metro Chiefs to chair the Metro Chiefs Fire Chiefs Association. So I'll take over that. That's the 16 largest departments in California. And Jill and I will support that for moving forward. That ends my report unless you have some questions.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions from the board members? All right, great, thank you. Moving on to the operations report, Chief Bridge.
Good evening, President Sheets and directors. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good deal. Eric Bridge, Deputy Chief Operations, and just want to brief you on some numbers we've been doing for the last few weeks, but prior to giving you some stats and numbers of call volumes, so I'll brief you on our participation at the Real-Time Crime Center during the civil unrest days. We were fortunate to have a good solid relationship with the Sacramento Fire Department and Sacramento Police Department. We were able to occupy some limited space downtown where they have the ability to view the city in a way that assists us with deploying resources in case the civil disturbance gets out of hand. So we had somebody there every night, sometimes till 3 in the morning, from 5 p.m. till 3 in the morning. And we were able to work closely with the Sheriff's Department. And this is where all the law enforcement officers would convene and be able to meet and discuss together the work in a unified command type structure. So it's a very valuable resource. The relationships are paying off. And fortunately, the way it was handled, our losses were minimal in terms of businesses and such. But the good news is the injuries were also very limited as well. So, and then moving on to our response to the COVID-19, we do have Critical Care Response Unit 102 and 109 still in service till the end of this month. They are still providing a valuable resource. I spoke with Captain Scott Perryman this morning, and he continues to remind me of how much the Sacramento County Public Health Department is grateful for our willingness to step in and provide those to provide response to many of the areas where some of our less fortunate members of our community are not able to access COVID-19 swab tests in those. So we're having a good impact there. There's, again, our main target is congregate living facilities. There has been a few positive responses, a few positive cases in the last week, whereas we went about 2.5 weeks without any, but we've had, I think it was around 5 or 10 as opposed to 0 and 0 for the last several weeks. Again, most of those were asymptomatic. So that continues to be a trend. And now we can move into some of the numbers. We've had the trends, just so you have a little general idea of where we've been since the beginning of the year. And I'll just be real brief with the numbers so you can see the trend. In January, we average just over 400 responses a month. So January, we ran 426. February, we ran 435 total responses, fire, EMS, everything. And then we saw our numbers, or excuse me, I'm just giving you the top busy numbers there. No, I'm sorry. Total numbers of responses were 8,400 in January, 8,000 in February, 7,800 in March. And then in April, that's when they had the significant drop, 6,700 calls in April. And then May, we jumped up to 7,800. Currently, we're on track for about the same number for the month of June, 7,500. So the call volume, you saw the dip. We've been reporting out about that. So things seem to be appearing to be back on track to have normal run volume. The interesting numbers were the fire responses we've had throughout from January through now have been holding steady at about 12% of our responses. So that never dipped. The total number of EMS responses, though, in that month of April was when we saw our big drop. We typically would see something closer to around 7,000. We only had 5,600 EMS responses in the month of April. As the fire responses stay at 12%, I also want to bring to your attention to the fire behavior that's projected that we get from our fire behavior specialists that generally work for the CAL FIRE area, but they've been reporting that the fuel moisture in the Northern California sections have been extremely dry. So they anticipate the fire behavior to be a little bit more busy from Sacramento on up to the borders. And to be true, as typically our call volume for fire incidents has been around 11, 12% a month. It's around 15% for this month so far. And we just got off of another fire in the Placer County, right on the border of our district. It was just on the Fafawar-Larga, north of PE. We had PFE, was about a 50-acre response. So the fuels are dry, and fortunately we had our dozer and our copter up in the air to assist CAL FIRE with that response. CAL FIRE and Placer County and Roseville Fire Department, but 4 of our companies and our dozer and our copter and 2 of our chief officers assisted CAL FIRE with command of that incident. Good job, no structures lost, nobody was injured, and again, that was about 50 acres in all. Those are the big numbers and stats of what we're doing. Again, I couldn't be more proud of our members, and I want a big shout out to Chief Law and Marcy Mateo, who helped me with, they're the ones who provide me with all the stats, because those don't just provide and just jump into my brain automatically. So thanks to them so much for providing these numbers so I can provide those to you. The members are doing a fantastic job. The PPE works. We have a huge stockpile. We are in a good position and feeling very confident and comfortable with where we are moving in the future. In anticipation of any other future outbreaks, we're in a good solid position for now. However, we will continue to track that so we always stay in a good position to keep our members safe. So thanks to everybody, and that's my report for you tonight, unless you have any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions for the board members? All right, thank you, sir. Moving on to the firefighters, Local 522. Is Captain McGoldrick on the line?
I think Joel Roberts might be there tonight for him.
Yeah.
Hey,
Is
sir.
that Joel?
Good evening, everyone. Good
evening.
evening, President Sheets, Board of Directors. Filling in for Mike McGoldrick tonight. He had his daughter's graduation. Also wanted to welcome Director White. Always good to see a familiar face out there. And congratulations to the 18 new firefighters out there online. Although we're in unprecedented times, it was nice to see a lot of fire department tradition carried on. Still get goosebumps from the pipes and drums out there, and seeing badges pinned. So that's a huge accomplishment for them. Unfortunately, their families weren't able to attend, but hopefully they were able to celebrate at home. Last week in labor management, extended a thank you to management. Also wanted to send a thank you to the board of directors. The membership has felt supported during these unprecedented times with changes in working conditions, supporting us with PPE, policies, procedures, as well as the antibody testing. I know I felt personally very supported in that, so I want to extend a sincere thank you for that. Chief Harms touched on the captain's test tomorrow. Again, big major step in a lot of careers, so good luck to all those candidates. Also, congratulations to Julie Cole, Becky Cordova, Mark Schreck, and Jim Novotny for their years of service to the fire district. And also, with a heavy heart tonight, I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of Mike Spych. He was a longtime member at Metro Fire, retired, and then he retired from the line and actually came back as a logistics technician. He was also a vital member of the Deferred Comp Committee. He was well liked there, and just a very great, personable guy. So our thoughts and well wishes to his family. And that's all I have for tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions or comments? All right, moving on to the committee and delegate reports. As reported, the executive committee met today. We do not have another meeting planned right now. Moving on to Communications Center JPA, Chief Shannon.
Good evening, President Sheet, boards, and board. Communications Center meeting met on June 9th. We did approve preliminary budget for fiscal year 2021. Of course, with that comes some financial challenges, some fiscal challenges. Chief Flagman and the staff are ready to tackle and move the center forward. A little more more information on that as the years go on, or as the year goes on. Graduation, the academy, unfortunately, they lost a recruit. The dispatcher academy is down to 7. They are all pretty strong candidates left, and it looks like they're going to have a graduation on July 3rd. More information as it comes forward. Into report, and next meeting is June 23rd.
Thank you, sir. Questions or comments? All right, moving on to California Fire Rescue Training JPA. Chief Shannon.
Welcome again. We have not had a meeting for quite some time. We will meet June 18th next week, Thursday, over at 3121 Gold Canal. I hoped there's a lot of information and a lot of ground to catch up since we have not met for quite a while. So my next report out should be quite informational. Into report.
Thank you, sir. All right, moving on to Finance and Audit Committee, Director Orzali.
Finance and Audit Committee has not met, and we have our next appointment. Our next meeting is to be arranged.
All right, a little broken up, but I think we got it.
Okay.
Policy Committee, Director Gould.
No report.
All right, we'll move on to board members' questions and comments. Director Gould.
I just want to thank everybody for their work on the budget. It's a good, solid, I think, projection of a lot of unknowns. But thank you, Amanda and her team. Always do a great job, and I like the conservative approach to this because of so many unknowns. But thank you very much, and thank you for all the work that goes into making these virtual meetings somewhat seamless and easy. Thank you.
All right, thanks, sir. Moving on, Director Orzali.
I just want to reiterate mostly what Director Gould just said. The reports are, we have a few variables, and Amanda and her team does a fantastic job in keeping us financially sound, and I truly appreciate that. So with that said, I'll end my report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to again echo what Directors Orzali and Gould said, and I can't say it any better. Beyond that, I was excited to see the development proposal plan or sign go up on Rancho Cordova Parkway for Station 68 this week. That means things are moving, and that's really good for our community and for our men and women that work out of 68, so they finally have a good solid station to call home. Beyond that, just everyone stay safe, keep doing what you're doing, keep our exposure rates and our numbers and our infections down. So good luck. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Director Clark. Director Clark.
Director Clark, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I just wanted to, I don't have much to add. The other directors have already expressed some of the sentiments that I have. I'd also like to congratulate the retirees. Hope they have a long, healthy retirement. As usual, CFO Amanda and their staff do a great job and make it so much easier for us to understand this budget. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Director Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. Affirmations on all the statements previous to mine, and with a few additions. Welcome aboard to all the new recruits. Best of luck. Glad to have you as members of Metro Fire. Thanks, Chief Yada County 2x2. It's really going well. It's a very important communication tool for Metro Fire. And I'm glad that it has continued, and exchange of information can be very, very critical. It comes down to particular details and aspects. So anyway, it is a great communication tool, and I'm so glad we have that. And a big thanks to the fire chief and his staff for continuing to present the best of Metro at these meetings. I greatly appreciate that. And also an additional shout out to Chief Harms, Jill Guzman, as well as, and especially Chief Casatini and Fire Marshal Barsdale. We have been working on a fire prevention issue, and their assistance and direction have been invaluable. It's an ongoing situation, but I need to shout out and say thank you to them. Madam President, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Director White.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd also like to thank Joel Roberts for the welcome. I appreciate it. And I'd like to thank the executive committee for the trust and placing me on the policy committee and back up on the Sacramento County 2x2. I look forward to contributing in those areas. I also want to thank Jason Cahill for coming all the way out to Station 59 to administer my COVID-19 antibody test. I'm happy to report that I passed without even studying, but I think that too is a truly great benefit. And to echo the remarks that Joel Roberts said, that, you know, it shows a lot, speaks a lot about the labor management relationship at Metro Fire. So I want to wish those taking the captain's exam good luck. I want to congratulate Chief Harms on his new appointment to chair of the California Metro Chiefs. And I would respectfully ask that we just take a moment of silence at the end of tonight's meeting in honor and respect for Mike Spike, who's a good friend, a neighbor, and someone who has contributed significantly to the organization in more ways than one. So that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Director Sailors.
I would just like to thank everyone for their presentations tonight. I'd like to wish luck to all the potential captains taking their written test tomorrow. And I'd like to thank all the crews that were working today in my neighborhood, putting out 2 different grass fires in Alberta. One of them was not in Alberta, but it was just close to it over here in Placer County, but we went out and helped. Thank you, Chief Harms, for finding out about that fire for me, since it was not in our district. Congratulations, Chief Harms, for being elected to the board for Metro Fire Chiefs. And that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I too want to wish all of the captain or the employees that are taking the captain's test best of luck on the exam tomorrow. Congratulate the employees that promoted and the retirees. With that, we will observe a moment of silence and I will adjourn the meeting after. Thank you. And with that, we will adjourn. Next meeting will be on June 25th. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right.